Thanks everyone for tuning in for the next episode of the AI Adoption Playbook. I'm here actually today with Mandy Andress from Elastic. She's the CISO there. Mandy, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about what you do as the CISO at Elastic?
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversation. And as CISO at Elastic, I have been at the company for 7 years, came in pre-IPO to establish and build out the strategic security program. So I have accountability for all information cybersecurity, from how the business operates, compliance, customer trust, to product security and security of our cloud SaaS offerings that we sell to our customers. So a full scope of both enterprise and global. Elastic's a fully remote, globally distributed company, cloud native. So a very interesting tech stack and interesting operating environments that bring some unique and fun challenges to the role.
Yeah, I bet. How many folks are you guys at Elastic these days?
We're about 3,500 employees now in
Really cool.
30 plus countries.
Nice. That's really awesome. One of the things that's super interesting to me about Elastic in the context of the sort of broader AI adoption transformation that the world is going through at the moment is you guys are obviously an enterprise trying to adopt AI and trying to figure out how it applies to you, but you're also a key player in the AI stack, right? Tell me a little bit more about how that influences your strategy as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So from an AI stack perspective, one of the I'd say more common implementations for Elastic is as a vector database supporting an AI application. Certainly retrieval augmented generation to help eliminate or at least better control hallucinations on LLMs and bringing in that enterprise context. And so we look at it both from a perspective of how do we support and help customers be successful within their organizations and using AI when we're talking about the core Elasticsearch platform. And then we have our solutions that run on top of that. So we have a security solution with our SIEM. We have an observability solution as well as a search solution. So then it's building upon the core capabilities. How do we also utilize those capabilities and help companies be successful if they are using a given solution? For example, in the SIEM solution, have a capability called attack discovery, which is taking alerts from a SIEM and using a public LLM, whichever one your organization supports you connecting to, and looks across all of those alerts and puts it together into an attack pattern. So it's like combining these 10 alerts looks like it's this type of attack coming against your environment. So really helping to triage and helping to structure a lot of the alerts for an analyst to spend their time investigating more than just trying to combine steps together.
Yeah, really, really cool. One of the things that I'm curious about with that, a use case like that, for example, is in the security space alone, I feel like I must have heard of at least 100, but maybe an order of magnitude more than that use cases, right? And I feel like for an enterprise like Elastic, you've got limited bandwidth to go chase after every single thing that you could plausibly do, right? So how do you guys crystallize and sort of pick this thing as the thing to get started on and to start working on versus any of the other sort of security problems that you could have tried to solve?
First, looking at, we overall, like many programs, take a risk-based approach. And so it's looking holistically across the Elastic environment, combined with what we're seeing in the broader threat landscape, also what we're seeing in business roadmap, business plans. What are the areas that we need to focus on the most? And so, of course, in today's world, threat actors heavily targeting credentials, whether it's exposed credentials or non-human identities that get accidentally leaked, API keys, access tokens, and the like. So we've been spending a lot of time in that space, just both building up our inventory and ensuring that the processes and the controls we have in place are robust in that area. And it also impacts our detection capabilities because one threat actor or a malicious insider is using known credentials, it just looks like a standard user. So really starting to get that into the behavior analytics and applying those capabilities, which is, again, we're starting to bring in more detailed machine learning and AI back into the security analytics picture.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm not really following currently is that when you describe this really interesting use case, and it makes total sense that, the business value is the thing that's like driving that decision. I think the thing that can be really hard, both for me and I think generally for like folks trying to grapple with this, is how do you quantify the like value? And there's actually something kind of interesting that's analogous here between like the security world and the AI world where it overlaps, where everyone kind of knows that security is important, but quantifying the value of security can be extremely difficult. And there's like a similar analogy with AI where everyone kind of knows they have to adopt AI, but quantifying the value of not doing so or like to justify budgets and stuff can actually be a very difficult process. So I'm curious, like, for you, as you think about in your security org, like the things that you're going after, like how do you quantify that business value? How do you like make the case to the CFO or to the other folks in the room that like this is the thing worth investing in?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple different ways that I think through that. One is, the capabilities today for a lot of the AI tools is automation, hyper automation, a little more nuanced automation. And so looking at it from that perspective, finding areas where you can take advantage of that type of technology and free up your resources to focus on other things. In security, there's always way more work than we have resources that we'll be able to handle. And so we're not at any loss of work to do if we automate out half of our processes, which are lots to do. But it's first looking at the way we look at it is I'll ask teams, where are you spending most of your time? Having teams really look at and sometimes track a bit more formally where they're spending their time to give them some insights. And then once they get that information, then looking at, okay, we're spending a third of our time working in this area and then getting into the details. Well, what is that? What's manual? What are some things? What are some ideas that we could automate? What are some things that we could remove? And really getting very critical about how we could change our approach there. Sometimes that's a new tool. Sometimes that's just automating something. Sometimes that's challenging. This is the way we've always done it, and it's time maybe to do something else. And then with that, you're freeing up time and resources to then allow either kind of new activities to come on or the ability to hit some strategic activities or some fun activities that folks just haven't had the time. So that's one side of it. The other side is as just security continues to scale, grow, and expand, taking advantage and utilizing AI technologies to balance out the need to add new folks to the team. They're not always going to be able to hire. So the combination of both being more efficient in utilizing the resources that you have available today and utilizing technology to be able to scale more exponentially with technology versus some trying to approach it linearly with adding more people. You also get to a scale where just adding more people isn't always going to help as well in having to think differently about how to approach some of that.
Yeah, loads to unpack there. So like definitely like put a pin in that thought. We'll come back to it. One of the things that you said that I thought was super interesting was, oftentimes even once you know that you want to solve a problem, it can be quite difficult to figure out like what's the right like approach to solving that problem, right? And is it picking the right tool? Is it like automating it something? Is it just changing your processes, that kind of thing? I think especially in the AI world, and I'm not sure if this is generally true, but there is like really a tremendous amount of appetite both to build things internally, but then also to like buy as many like of these cool AI applications as you possibly can, right? And I'm sure as the CISO of Elastic, you said it's a over 3,000 person org, you are going to be fielding a lot of requests of like, hey, we're trying to build this AI application, we're trying to buy this AI tool. Yeah, I mean, how do you think about managing the sort of overwhelming flood of requests that you're getting to like review all of these tools, figuring out like, how do you prioritize between taking a breath and figuring out, okay, what is our AI strategy as an enterprise? Like, what's our thesis on when we build, when we buy, what types of tools we want to buy, blah, 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 versus saying, okay, we're in the middle of this huge transformation. Let's let people innovate and figure it out and like be very decentralized. And then sort of figure out how to rein it all back in later.
Yeah. a small problem to solve.
Yeah, no big deal, right, Mandy?
Exactly. I would say at the highest level, the process hasn't changed. It's still risk-based. It's still buy versus build. What skills do we have? What core competencies do we want to focus on versus what are more commoditized capabilities that either others can do better or we don't want to invest specifically. So that overarching process doesn't change. Adding AI into it. So first, it's a new area, and I go back to using mobile and mobile devices coming into the enterprise. And before that, the internet, when it was, why do you need it, justify it, and understanding the security. So at the moment, we have a process for someone, if they want to bring in an AI type tool, it goes through a review process. We understand legally and contractually how they'll utilize the data that is being provided into that service and security controls and all the standard components. That's getting harder and harder just as more and more solutions are integrating AI everywhere to where basically now almost at any solution, a third party that you utilize has AI somewhere. So now it's just getting that a bit more embedded into the third party risk management process and just becoming a standard component. So that's on the third party side. On how we're looking to apply it to the enterprise, that's something that's ongoing. We're always looking at ways the technology has changed and evolved so rapidly that we've put in place a lot of the standard approaches with LLMs. We have a chat LLM with support that our customers can utilize to work with chat. We have one internally as well from a knowledge-based perspective. So I have that now starting to look at with agentic AI and agents. How can we make better use of that? Certainly across the enterprise, but within security as well. Where can we use that type of technology and approach to help us? And so it's an ongoing, continuous evaluation. And I think that will just continue as the speed is only, at least it feels like it's getting faster.
Right. No, it's crazy. It's getting faster in many different dimensions, right? The foundation models are getting better. The startups that support those foundation models are getting better. The offerings from the hyperscalers and the enterprises are getting better. Like the ecosystem is getting more mature. These products integrate better with each other. It's blistering, actually. It's I've never seen anything like it in the tech industry before. One of the things that I find really interesting about you guys is, again, like I said, being part of the AI stack, as well as being an enterprise that's trying to apply and adopt these tools. So you mentioned that you have a customer support bot, that the sort of ecosystem of providers in the customer support bot, sort of industry is pretty mature now. There's obviously the newer entrants like Decagon, but all of the traditional customer support players like Zendesk and Salesforce have their own AI to support those. You guys also have to think about, well, we are Elastic, right? We're a vector store provider, or do we want to build on top of our own technology as opposed to buying these tools externally? Tell me a little bit about how that process works. Does the fact that Elastic is part of the AI stack shape your perspectives here? Have you gone with external providers? Do you prefer providers using Elastic? How does that work?
Yeah, we do certainly try to prioritize using our own technology where possible. And certainly within the security team, we have an initiative that we call Customer Zero. We use our own SIEM. We use our own endpoint security. We build a lot of processes on top of the Elastic stack and are starting to work more with the team on using the security assistant and how can we continue to expand utilizing that and working with the product teams to provide feedback as practitioners, what would be interesting, what would be valuable for us to be more successful in our roles. And so we certainly try to do that. But it does come to a point, certainly from the security perspective of, could we build it ourselves? Yes. Yep. Is that the best use of our time versus going to buy a solution? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Those are the conversations and the thought processes we have to go through. I always love to build things on Elastic. It's what brought me to the company. They're ahead of technology. So 7 years ago, before I joined, I think a couple of years before I joined, they acquired a machine learning company. And at the time, it was just a stack, none of the solutions. And so just being able to ingest logs as your data and then using machine learning. And it was very straightforward. And that was at the time where all these UniBA tools and it was very complex and trying to get out. So I was just impressed how forward thinking, and I continue to see that in AI and just how can we, you're only limited in your use of Elastic by your own creativity. And if there's something you want to do with data, you can figure out how to do it in Elastic. So Of course, a huge fan. I worked there, probably a little bit biased, but a huge fan before I came to the company.
Nice. Well, that's probably why you came to the company, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. And I'm just curious, like tactically, for the customer support stuff and for the internal chatbot on your knowledge base, like what did you guys end up doing? Did you end up building that on Elastic? Or did you just feel like, hey, this is like commodity on the market now, we can just buy the solution?
It's a combination of building ourselves with our own technology. Internally, we use foundational models with a number of providers. And so we do a lot of work internally to just test out and understand which foundational models work best in which scenarios and kind of analyze it and make decisions that way.
Cool. So you haven't chosen to roll out like, ChatGPT Enterprise or a Copilot across the organization yet. You've like built some version of that internally and you're able to accelerate it by like your expertise and knowledge of the like Elastic component specifically.
We use both. So, certainly we're GitHub shop. You use GitHub Copilot and things like that. So it's a combination of, and again, that gets back to a lot of the tools that we all use today are just, whether it's a Copilot, a chat assistant, anything that they're just, it's getting integrated everywhere and continuing.
One of the things that is difficult is like the words just all run into each other. So I use the word Copilot to Microsoft Copilot, but that's also really confusing because it overlaps with GitHub Copilot. But the word Copilot is now used in like 27 different products anyway. And we actually had to recently rebrand our product because we'd initially called our product like a Copilot platform to like build Copilots. And then it just got like massively confusing for all of our customers because they were like, wait, there's like 28 things that I use that are also called Copilot. So how does this relate to all of those things? So that was definitely like a fun challenge of being in a very new industry. It's like, who wins the control over the naming rights? And it has been kind of funny seeing the lawsuits as well. I've seen people try and patent or trademark like some of the most ridiculous things, like AI itself, for example. But that was super, super helpful. One of the things I'm really curious about from your perspective is like, okay, where do you think like security should sit in like defining a company's overall AI like strategy? One of the things that like, from my perspective, I've sort of seen it evolve a little bit over time, is that I think in, the beginning of Credo's existence in 2022, 2023, we actually saw security was often like the stakeholder, the decision maker, like the person driving the AI strategy at enterprises. And over time, that seems to have shifted a little bit. And I'm curious for your perspective on that. Was that just like a lack of understanding of the technology early on? Was it actually that we got it wrong and security should be at the center of that? Like, how do you view like security's role in helping the enterprise like set an AI strategy and then roll it out?
Yeah, it's certainly evolved over the past couple of years. Just companies have deepened their own understanding. I would say initially, yes, it was security teams that were pushing in the middle of it quite a bit, because I think that's pretty standard for today. If there's something new, it starts in security and then figure out where does it best live in the organization. That's why we see the CISO role just continuing to expand in its breadth and in scope.
Really cool.
And then as businesses started to understand and learn where they could take advantage of it and where they could use it, and it really becoming a business capability, then it needs to live in the business, whether that's within business lines, depending on how an organization is structured, if they have an AI officer or part of an innovation team, but ownership living in the business area where the use of the technology will be effective and help drive revenue, and then security and IT teams being a part of that, just as any other technology coming in, whether it was mobile, cloud. If we think back to the last couple major changes in tech, but then there's also the perspective of how to use AI in security and how to kind of use AI in IT just to help be either from a productivity perspective, from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective, and that is much more focused both on looking at how your own team operates and where you can find it, but then also structured within whatever guardrails the organization is providing for overall AI usage. So we come at it from a lot of different areas and perspectives, both in helping protect the company, but also helping our own team be more successful.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And, I think I really like the perspective of, okay, eventually, once this stuff stops feeling like novel, it needs to live in the business somewhere, and we need to figure out where that is. Do you have thoughts on, how businesses should operate this? Like, I've seen different versions of this where there's some of our customers, the AI platforms live with the IT teams. In other customers, it lives with the ML platform team. Like there's a centralized ML team. There are also like other variations as well, of course. Curious if you have like opinions based on what you've seen from both internally at Elastic, but also from your guys' customers who I'm sure talk to you about this. Like, what do you think works?
I'll take my law school education coming into play and answer, it depends.
Nice.
I think it's more, certainly this comes back to a lot of my time in financial services. If you have a brand new technology and you want to make the most use of it, it's often best to kind of separate that technology out into its own team to where you have folks working on it that aren't necessarily biased or coming at it from the perspective of just how things have always been done.
Yeah.
And that's, as we look back on agile development processes and working in sprints and things like that, a lot of companies took that approach when we talked about digital transformations and things like that and moved to cloud. Because you had to rethink how to approach a problem to be able to take full advantage of what cloud brought. And it's the same thing within AI. And certainly AI in security. We're going to need to rethink and be comfortable completely changing how we approach things. And so if it's something that your employee base is really excited about and has the capability to do so, then embedding it everywhere makes sense. If you need to at least incubate and start off with a separate team that's building all of that kind of natively, and then it expands out. So a lot of it depends on organizationally where you are, where your teams are, skill sets, and also where you expect to be utilizing the technology.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I've definitely seen very sharp difference between the rate of adoption from our like technology customers who typically, everybody has 274 use cases for this stuff before it even like reaches them, versus some of the more traditional enterprises. Like, we work with the federal government, for example, and there's just a lot more like uncertainty, and there's often like lack of clarity on like, hey, what even is AI actually, right? And just helping people understand that often needs like a dedicated like AI team or like internal team that is really owning the internal education of like what the technology even is, to figure it out. So that resonates super well. It is curious to me, obviously, as the CISO, that you aren't like necessarily the biggest advocate for saying AI should be like run from the security team. I'm curious if that is partly because you've seen security teams implement unnecessary frictions, right? Slow folks down when they don't actually need to be slowed down, especially with AI. There's a lot of paranoia and concern. Some of it valid, of course, some of it like legitimate. Early on in this industry, people sort of forget this now, but early on in the industry, the foundation models would just train on any data that you gave them, right? I heard from some of my friends at OpenAI that when they were internally using ChatGPT, but they hadn't published it yet, folks at OpenAI were using it to write their own internal performance reviews and their reviews of their direct reports. And actually their security team came out and were like, no, you can't do that. You can't put that sensitive information into the system. So obviously the industry is maturing and folks are getting a little bit smarter about this. But I'm curious if you have perspectives on like, where are security teams going too far, slowing things down too much?
Yeah, I think it's, some organizations, say when ChatGPT came out, completely blocked the entire organization from using that. Those companies, they had their reasons and the rationale where that was the best decision. I struggle with that just because it's still available wherever someone goes and has an internet connection. And so even if it's blocked internally, they're still able, whether it's on a mobile device or on their home devices, able to take advantage and use it. So it's, for me, I try to take a pragmatic approach and philosophically try to keep security practices as close to the core work as possible.
Yeah.
And doing that, I think where a lot of the friction comes in with security teams is they're trying to mandate processes and approaches while they're far removed from the day-to-day activities of the teams that actually have to live through it. And so working closely and having them own or at least have significant input into how do I integrate this so it works with me and I'm not trying to fight against it or having to work around it to be able to do my job. And with that, building on just education and awareness and helping folks understand the why and really building that innate capability and knowledge within an organization goes a long way. You still need kind of governance level 2 if you're looking at it from a kind of 3-tier perspective of control. And so you still need controls, guardrails, and governance to make sure things are operating the way that you expect, but really putting a lot of focus within the business processes built to enforce controls, have security in place, and start from that perspective. It's the approach that I've taken. We try to take at Elastic.
That makes like loads of sense, of course. And I think, there's a lot of wisdom built up over the years. And clearly, I think the experience, people have learned a lot, I think, from the experience of, as you said, the sort of mobile transition and then the cloud transition as well. One of the things that I have noticed personally, just anecdotally, that is so different this time versus like the cloud transition is I think in the cloud transition, for example, customers like enterprises typically just bet on one cloud provider to begin with. And it was like, we're going to put our whole universe into AWS or, maybe it was Azure or GCP if it was a few years like later. And of course, what happened is like after 5 years of that, you get the AWS bill and you're like, and I think it's been really cool to see how the enterprises have woken up a little bit here. And like right from the beginning, you said this yourself, like, designing systems to be flexible with the different foundation models, being able to plug things in, whatever the foundation model that you want to use is. So you're not locked into the thing in the way that we got like very locked into our cloud providers. I think it's like so hard to migrate off of AWS or GCP, whereas a lot of applications, like for us at Credle, like if we want to migrate a tool off of GPT-4o into Claude 3.7 or, the latest Llama, it's literally just like a one-line change in a GitHub repo and like, that's it, you're done. And that's like, if you're transitioning any part of our infrastructure off of AWS, it's like a 6-month project, and so it's just like really, really cool and interesting to see, how I think security teams have actually done a really good job here of like, okay, rather than like block ChatGPT completely, let's be intelligent about building guardrails and governance and like protections for ourselves and as an enterprise such that, if we need to, we can move off of GPT really quickly. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. That's a significant lesson from cloud and cloud lock-in before most evolved into a hybrid cloud environment. And now we have token costs that we...
Right. Exactly. And those token costs, they're going up fast, I mean, the token cost per token is, or like, for a given model, like the cost per token is going down really fast. But the appetite to use the product is going up so fast that, and it's obvious because we see the insane growth of all these businesses, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, the Gemini part of GCP's business are all just growing like crazy, even despite the fact that the like per token cost for a given model is plummeting at the same time. Cool. Really, really interesting. So to round out a little bit, if you have to give like one piece of advice or like one takeaway that you would encourage folks who are building AI solutions or trying to implement AI solutions internally in terms of either how to control and govern those solutions or just, more broadly, like from a security perspective, for like, what are your lessons as CISO of Elastic? What is the like core, most central piece of advice that you would want people to take away, or that you've taken away from your experiences deploying AI and building AI so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take it from a security perspective.
Cool.
And if you look ahead and attempt to kind of anticipate where pain points will be as we continue to expand our AI usage, there will be areas of security that we don't necessarily handle it well today and haven't historically handled it. But using AI and expanding the usage of AI will just expedite and continue to expand very, very quickly those areas. Thinking, access controls, non-human identities, API keys, access tokens.
Right.
And so to really look at what are the areas of your core capabilities or areas as you go into AI that you want to make sure that foundationally you get right. And if you have a foundation right, then you can build and adapt and evolve those capabilities wherever the technology goes. And so that's my advice, is really take a step back, not getting so distracted just by the technology, but what are those fundamentals that need you to be able to succeed and grow and scale, and work on those. And then the rest will be a little bit easier over time.
Really, really cool. Really awesome. Okay, sweet. So I've got two silly questions to round out. So my first really silly question is, when do you think AI will replace your job?
Replace my job? I would love AI to replace it. I think that'll be a while. 'Cause it needs a lot of context and nuance and bringing in a whole lot of different perspectives. So I don't think it'll be anytime soon, but I'll certainly be working towards that.
That's awesome. Funnily enough, like almost everyone that I ask this question to is like, yeah, I would love AI to replace my job. Like, it's like the common theme between the folks, I guess, like engaging in the topic and like really, at the forefront of the thinking is that like, hey, like let's embrace the change and let's like, really enjoy the shifts that are coming. It's curious, like, you talk about reliability and you talk about like the various challenges associated with like getting there. How much of those problems do you view as like research problems versus do you view as like engineering problems?
That's a good question. I would say today, more research, just as we're all starting to learn and understand, and even just attempting to stay current, and research to build that knowledge base for ourselves and build that experience. And over time, certainly will become, there are engineering challenges today, but I think much more be engineering challenges as we continue to really grow and expand usage and implementation of all of these capabilities and technologies that we're learning about.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's been really interesting for me is exactly what you say. Like, the more you implement this stuff, the more you discover about the nuances of like, how the behavior like should be relative to like what you might expect. And I think because AI sort of feels a bit like human intelligence, it can sometimes be misleading actually, where you just map everything to how you would want a human to think about something. And actually not everything quite works that way. Like the intelligence is a sort of alien intelligence where in some ways it's like way, way smarter than us. And in other ways it's like comically kind of behind us, and it's quite difficult to reason about in purely like human intelligence, using purely human intelligence as the analogy. So you really need experience of the alien to like understand how the alien thinks, I should stop calling it an alien because I'm probably going to freak more people out, but it's a helpful metaphor for me anyway. I guess my last question for this is, do you have a favorite AI model, and do you prefer AI models for their personality or for their intelligence? And does that match how you think about humans?
I don't have a favorite AI model. I like to try different things with different models and see how they react and how their personalities, as you say. I think ChatGPT is one that for me comes up with some really interesting, I say, personalities in trying to, it'll go to extremes if you say, answer in the tone of this type of role or persona. And it's fun to just put some things in there and see what comes out.
Nice. It's been really, really cool to see the like personalities evolve. One of the very first things that we did as a business was we built like a really like toy agent for testing purposes to see like, is the system working or not, right? Like, is it up? Do we have downtime? And the prompt that we used for that tool was just essentially like write me a poem based on the user's prompt. And I think every 5 minutes or something, we like trigger that health check to just see if the test is running or not. We didn't really ever think about the responses of this. It was really just like, is there a response? And I was looking at the sort of logs in our logging system of the responses. And in the early days of the test, I guess I'd like read the responses and I'd like seen the poems, and they were poems. They like technically had the form of a poem, but you'd never mistake the author for a poet. Like it was quite far away from what you could like reasonably call good poetry. And for the first time, like a week ago, I read this poem and I was like, whoa, like this is good poetry, actually. I'm like quite impressed. And look, it's not perfect and it's not quite Shakespeare yet, but like, is it writing a more compelling poem than I would? Like, yeah, absolutely. Like it is now. And, I think that it's causing me, and I think it will cause many people like some degree of existential questioning around what does it mean to be human, right? Like, what are the things that define our abilities as humans? If it's not going to be poetry and art and the like what actually is that going to be? I'm curious if you have thoughts on what you've learned about what it means to be human from your interactions with AI.
Yeah, it's what I've thought about it so far, just with LLMs and being probability focused.
Yeah.
For me, it is humanity and humans that have fed all of the content into it. So it's just replaying back to us things that we've already done. Maybe it's doing it in a way where it's able to take all sorts of different styles and inputs that just, as humans, our brains don't handle and scale.
Right.
So I'm not questioning humanity just yet, but
nice.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we sure will. I bet. Mandy, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, really good fun. Is there anything that you want our audience to check out, or anything that you recommend the reading if they want to learn more about you or about the work that you do at Elastic?
Certainly, LinkedIn is the place where I'm most active. Mandy Andress is my LinkedIn profile name, and feel free to take a look, reach out if you have any questions. But really, just try things out, learn new things about AI. It's going to change the world.
Awesome.
We need to be part of it.
Thank you very much, Mandy.